I lived in Worthing years and years ago, hence where I know Fordy from. Been in Brighton for the last couple of years, and whilst I have a background in recruiting and talent acquisition, for the last few years I've focused pretty much exclusively on the product management world. So Mark asked me if I'd come along and talk a little about that. There you go, that's me. You'll find me all over the place online. I'm pretty easy to track down. Feel free to reach out with questions or whatever afterwards if needed. Before we get stuck in, who here is a product manager at the moment? Anybody? Product person. I know we've got stealth one down here as well. I'm guessing the majority of the rest is a mix of digital people, but developers, designers, business analysts, product managers, project managers.
Marketing.
Okay, marketing. Nice mix. Cool. Okay. So, let's start with what product management is. In view of my product, the organisation that I work with, it's firstly the user side of things, looking at what the user wants, what the user needs, what the user's trying to achieve. There's then an element of it that is technology, so what the technology is actually capable of doing, what you can build, what is actually feasible and realistic. And then thirdly, the business side of things, so where the business wants to go, what its vision is, how it's going to make money. All of these interesting things that are very, very relevant to the board, particularly. From a product perspective, you're sat right in the middle. It's a very, very collaborative role. Some might see that as a good thing, but it depends what day of the week it is. Sometimes you feel more like a referee being assaulted from all sides. It can be somewhat variable. But we regard it as being the intersection between business, tech, and the user experience. So, from a product manager's perspective, you are getting involved in all of these things pretty much constantly. Bringing people together, looking at ideas, looking at things that you can test, how you can run experiments, looking at new technologies that come to market that might be useful and relevant. You're also in the somewhat unusual world of representing both internal and external interests. So from a product management perspective, a lot of the time you're going to be closer to the users than particularly the development and engineering teams. The product person very much has to represent that view. One of the opinions that we particularly lean to is that of Martin Kagan. Anybody come across Kagan before? If you're interested in the world of product, go read this guy's work. He's just released a second version of the Inspired book that this quote was taken from. He's pretty much the godfather of Silicon Valley product management. Comes over to London a few times a year for classes and conference talks, etc. So, I'm going to get, as we go forward, I'm going to look a little bit at some of the tips and tricks of product management, some of the core aspects of the role that will be perhaps helpful for people that are considering moving into it and working more closely with product people. But I think it's worth doing a couple of minutes on the backstory, where product management originally came from. Started back in 1931, P&G, or Procter & Gamble as it was known then, the original madmen of the advertising world. And they were specifically looking at how they could learn more about their customers and fold that back into the marketing faster and faster and faster. Be more reflective of what customers want and make those messages resonate. We're pretty much at the start of America's Great Depression at this point, which ran through to around about 1939. So that's kind of where the craft originated. Hewlett-Packard is an interesting part of the story because Hewlett-Packard was probably the first company that was actually founded to be a product-driven organisation. People know it for printers, PCs, laptops now. That wasn't what Hewlett-Packard was started for. Hewlett-Packard was started to do discovery. They didn't actually know what they wanted to build, they just knew that they wanted to build something. So that art of discovery, of user research, of prototyping, of experimenting, was everything that Hewlett-Packard was built on. Interesting fact about Hewlett-Packard, from 1943, for the next 50 years, the company delivered 20% revenue growth every year. 20% revenue growth, year on year, for 50 years straight. Possibly the only company of its size that's ever managed to do that. And certainly a beautiful case study in why product focus, a product-led organisation, can really deliver. Move forward through the 40s, 50s, 60s, and into the 70s, you see things like the Toyota production system. They're looking at things like just-in-time development, they're looking at better ways to move things through the process, to learn quickly, to iterate and practice to improve the process. Through the 90s, we saw a whole bunch of methodologies being introduced, particularly in the programming world, extreme programming. Some of the approaches to systems and business analysis particularly started being established back then, so DSDN, SSADM. 2001 was probably one of the most significant changes in our particular story, when I believe it was 17 engineers originally documented the Agile Manifesto. That changed pretty much everything, and is the basis on the way an awful lot of development is still run. And from there, we Mind the Product in 2010. Mind the Product occurred basically when 3 product managers in London were looking for other product managers and a little bit of therapy and a little bit of support. Much like this, a digital get-together where people can exchange ideas, learn from one another, challenge theories. Same sort of time, Eric Ries published Lean Startup. That was 2011. I think 2014, Barry O'Reilly then took that step forward with Lean Enterprise. 2 books specifically looking at the idea of lean experiments, how you can learn what you need to learn as fast and as quickly as possible through hypothesis and experimentation, not building out an entire system, then realising it wasn't really what you needed at all. How do we test those ideas first? So, Mind the Product, which is where I now work, started in 2010. There are conferences and meetups around the world specifically for product managers. About 80% of the community is product management. The bits around the edge of that, then people in UX, design, development, founders particularly of early stage companies who are looking to learn a little bit more about the craft of product management. So we run those meetups now in 158 cities around the world. Conferences in London, San Francisco and Hamburg this year. Next year around in Manchester, Singapore, possibly a couple of others. And that community is about 120,000 product managers, something like that. So the role has grown hugely over the last few years. If there's stuff in the product world that you want to know more about, we put a ton of content out there for free on the website. All the videos from the conferences, they all go up there, and they are world-class speakers, so do them yourselves if there's things that you can learn. So, putting this one together, I pulled together some bits from a few different presentations, and one of the ones I did last year was specifically looking at how teams collaborate, particularly organisations that are going through change and introducing product management for the first time. And one of the things the organisers were particularly conscious of was the number of people that were coming to product management from a business analysis world, and perhaps a little bit more formalist approach. So they asked me to look particularly at rules of engagement, how you can work with product managers and how product managers can work with you. Be open to other approaches. One of the things that experienced product managers will quite happily talk about is the fact that you do not have all the answers. You're never going to be expected to have all the answers. The best thing you can do is to be really, really open to other people's ideas, other people's approaches, and the fact that you are going to be wrong, probably quite a lot. Be humble. Have people come to you, be open to their ideas and talk through. Look Outside is a reference to, I think, a quote that originated with Steve Blank. Get outside the building. There are so many people that work with their own teams, they work with their own developers, they work with their own analysts, managers. They don't actually get outside the building. They don't talk to their customers enough. They don't look at what their competitors are doing. And when you have that insular view, when you live in a bubble, you're never going to come up with the best solution. Align the actions with the goals is something I'll talk about in a little bit more detail further on. But we are moving very much from an output-driven world to an outcome-driven world. And the closer we can get all of the teams aligned around the right goals, which is typically going to be an outcome for a user, the better the entire team will function. Don't forget to iterate. Who's familiar with the idea of build, measure, learn? You come across this one? A few people here? So typically what you're looking to do in a fast-paced agile world is you build a little bit of something. You put it out with customers or users, you measure what they're doing with it, and then you learn from that. What we see time and time again is people that get caught in what's becoming very well known as the build trap. Constantly building and shipping, building and shipping, building and shipping, never stopping to measure, never taking the time to learn. Progress is impossible without change, and those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything at all. George Marshall was known more as an author than as somebody who worked in software development, but I think the idea that he's putting forward here is absolutely bang on the money. Likewise, stubborn on vision, flexible on details was Jeff Bezos. The other one that comes up occasionally, goes with this, I have lost completely. Brilliant. So moving from tasks to goals, we see way too often software developers are particularly given clear instruction on what it is they're going to build, but not why, not how it's going to help the user. What is it going to make the user feel? What outcome is it trying to deliver for? If you understand the goal of the user, those tasks make a lot more sense. Likewise, moving from output to outcome, you see examples from time to time of what a system is designed to do, but not necessarily fully reflecting what the user is trying to achieve. It's a significant difference between output and outcome. So, I mentioned earlier the conferences that we run. One of the speakers that we had a few years ago was a lady called Kathy Sierra. And Kathy talked about being a badass product manager and particularly making your users awesome. And one of the examples that she brought forward at the time was the disconnect that you experience whenever you buy a digital camera, or any camera in fact. You're probably familiar with this, you've seen the adverts. The adverts are wonderful pictures of people enjoying a beach or a holiday or an adrenaline-filled experience. The feeling is the user being awesome. You then buy the camera, you get it out of the box, and you're faced with this user manual that is black and white pictures that are possible to understand, incredible technical detail, huge depths of instruction, and as a user, you end up feeling like a bloody idiot. The disconnect between the experience the user wants and the experience that you actually deliver is huge. So 5 steps to awesomeness. Understand your strengths. One of the things that I see within the world of product where teams are running well is the ability to cross-collaborate. And it's not just about communication, it's about understanding where certain people have strengths and where your weaknesses exist and can be balanced. One of the quotes I love from Mike Hagen here, I was talking about software engineers. If you only let an engineer write code, you're only getting 50% of the value. Engineers are amazing problem solvers, first and foremost. They're people who love challenges. Get them involved in the problem you're actually trying to solve. Help them understand where it is the user's trying to get to, and start getting more of that value out. We've all heard the phrase hearts and minds. And typically when you're working with an organisation and you're trying to get something done, move a team forwards, or get your board to agree to something that you want to do, you need to win hearts and minds. Now, if you actually break that down, what you're looking to do is to say you need logic and you need emotion. Now, it may well be there's somebody on your team that is spectacular at actually putting across a persuasive argument and raising emotions, raising feeling, getting a great reaction. You might have somebody else who absolutely can't generate that kind of excitement, but their logic is phenomenal. Now, if you compare those two people, then you can win hearts and minds. Then you can really start to knock down the roadblocks. Autonomy. As I mentioned earlier, I am a recovering recruiter. It's been 8 years since my last placement. I take it day by day. One of the things that isn't talked about that much, but is absolutely true, is that people very rarely leave a job for more money. They leave a job because they don't like their manager. They leave a job because they don't like where the company's going. But more often than not, they leave a job because they don't like how they're having to work. And a lot of the time it's because they're micromanaged, because they have the freedom, there's a lack of challenge there. If you can give people autonomy, it gives them a lot more satisfaction in what they do. Now, when you apply that to the world that we're in of building digital products, autonomy essentially comes down to the idea of saying, where are we trying to get to? As in, what is the outcome that we're looking for the user? If you can get that really, really clear, if you can get your engineering team focused around that, and then let them decide how best to deliver that, they're going to have far more fun getting it. They're going to enjoy it far more. There's a pretty good chance they're actually going to deliver a better solution for the user as well, because they understand what the technology can do, no better than the person writing the specs. Step 4. I love the way this guy bounces back. Ta-da! You're going to fail. We all work in tech, we've all seen stuff fail. Every time we launch something, you've got a decent chance that something somewhere's going to go wrong. Learn how to roll, learn how to bounce, learn how to come back from it. Building career resilience, particularly in tech, is crucial. And learning how to do this with grace and keep your team on board with you at the same time is crucial. So, the final one here is, as I said earlier, being humble enough to ask questions, to assume that you don't have all the answers. You're certainly not going to be right on the ones that you think you do have the answers. There's a particular question that comes up time and time again in the product world that I think is very, very underrated. And the question is quite simple. What problem do you try to solve? The closer you ask the customer and the more you ask that question, the clearer you'll be on what kind of outcome they're actually looking to get to. And it may well be that you have to go around that loop several times and keep asking that question. There's one of the Japanese manufacturing companies, I think it might be Toyota actually, came up with the 5 whys. Is anybody familiar with this one? Okay, one person there. So the 5 whys is a continuous probing set of questions. The particular example was production problems. On the production line, the machine kept getting jammed. Why did the machine keep getting jammed? Because things got stuck in it. What things keep getting stuck in it? Not workers' bags. Why did the worker's bag keep getting stuck in the machine? Because the worker had his bag with him at his workstation. Why did the worker have his bag with him at the workstation? Because he didn't have a locker to put it in. So the problem we need to solve is actually to give the worker a locker to go put the shit, so that it doesn't jam the machine up. Keep asking those questions, and you'll get there. Let's take a look at some of the trends in product management at the moment. It's a pretty young discipline, in the sense that we've been running minor product in London now for 8 years or so. That's probably about the length of product management as a discipline in the UK, if I'm honest. If I take a look at some of the larger organisations like Lloyds Bank, Vodafone, Tesco's, go back 6 or 7 years, they would have had 0 product managers working for those organisations. Vodafone now has 400. It's a young discipline, but it's growing really fast. So, things that are on point with the product world right now, things that people are talking about, further reading if you want to go dig out. The idea of the lean approach is both for startup and enterprise, and actually Jan has got a wicked set of slides on how you can actually use lean thinking in enterprise organisations to experiment and discover more quickly. Business model canvas, design thinking, rapid prototyping. We'll come on to some stuff around customer discovery a bit later again. Psychological safety is actually one that has popped up more and more in our circle over the last 2 years or so, I would say. And it is very much around the customer discovery and rapid prototyping. It is about figuring out how you can make your team feel safe. The reason that they need that psychological safety is quite simply the best product management, the fastest learning happens when people feel that they can fail. Because if they don't feel that they can fail, they won't run experiments. If they don't run experiments, it's hard for them to learn. People need to feel that it is acceptable to fail. What we need to try and do is give them frameworks to say, what's the smallest way in which we can fail and still learn? So this is where the lean approaches are particularly useful. If you are interested in learning more about this stuff, these are the places that it is being talked about right now. Company and industry blogs, so that'll be places like our own stuff, my product, but also companies like Intercom, ProdPad run fabulous blogs on product management techniques. There's an awful lot of writing on Medium. The quality there is less so because generally speaking it's individuals and their opinions rather than companies who maybe have professional writers and editing services available. The fact that our little firm comes in there third on that list is something that we're really proud of. This isn't our data, by the way. This comes from a company called Alpha UX in New York. They're an experimental research firm that work predominantly with the Fortune 500 firms. HBR, Product Hunt, Fast Company, the sites that you would expect. But these will be your top choices to go find out more. So defining the role, how has the role evolved? As I said earlier, it evolved originally out of the product marketing side of things. That delineation has now become much clearer. The product itself, product management itself, there are still quite a number of roles within that definition. If you spend time in the Valley, you'll see that they're becoming a little bit clearer. So you'll have research product managers, you will have technical product managers, you may well have product managers who specialise purely in growth. In the UK, we haven't reached anywhere near that level of delineation yet. It's still generally product managers and one-size-fits-all role, but I can see that becoming a lot clearer over the next couple of years. We separate them out from project managers, project managers and business analysts particularly. One of the things that I hear less these days, but still does come up occasionally is, what is the difference between a product manager and a project manager? And the easiest definition that I've heard to work with here is to say that a product manager is focused on making sure that you're building the right things, whereas a project manager is focused on making sure that you're building the thing right. Product is about the discovery, making sure that you're delivering value, making sure that you're working on the most important thing for your user, the most important thing for your company. Whereas project is very much about getting that thing shipped once you know what it is you need to go build. The other one that comes up regularly is the business analyst side of things, where typically you find that business analysts and product managers actually use an awful lot of the same skill sets, in some respects even the same tools, but they're coming at it with very different approaches. Oftentimes a business analyst will do lots more in the way of deep data, deep research, whereas product managers tend to be much more user-focused, user-facing, customer-focused. There's still a lot more work to do on the ideal collaborations for product teams. There are a few companies that are leading the way. Spotify have a model that is pretty well documented in terms of how they approach experimentation and defining what the smallest thing they can build to test an idea is. I would say in London, probably the likes of TransferWise are companies to look at as a good example of how they actually organise their product functions. As I said earlier, San Francisco is still leading in terms of the definition of that role. We've got a number of European cities that are chasing up hard. London, I think, probably leading the pack right now. Berlin, actually Lisbon is coming up hard as well right now. Discovery focus. As the tech world gets more and more competitive, it becomes necessary to not only build faster but also learn faster. And discovery focus is a huge part of this. There are more and more resources available on how to get in front of customers, how to work with customers, and actually extract the information that you need in meaningful fashion. One of the conversations I was having earlier this evening was around user research particularly, and how so many people make a terrible job of it. If user research is a part of what you do, I would suggest that you watch a video by a lady called Cindy Alvarez, who went up on the minor product site a couple of months back. She spoke for us at the conference that we did in San Francisco earlier this summer. And she's basically re-engineered the entire approach that Microsoft have to do user research. And the benefits that it's delivering are absolutely huge. I thoroughly recommend taking a look at that. On the road mapping side, roadmaps are going through something of a battle at the moment. There are still an awful lot of companies that will have dates all over their roadmaps because they want to know when things are coming out, particularly their marketing teams and their exec boards. That's a release plan. It's not a roadmap. A roadmap is looking at the things that you're going to build and the time frames in which you want to address them. And if you're going to say, in 9 months' time, we're going to be working on that and it's going to be delivered then, you know as well as I do, that's not going to happen. Best tool in the world, you're going to fail. Roadmaps should not have dates on them. And if you want to get into this one in a little bit more detail, Jaren's firm focuses specifically on this area of things. So I'm very much picking her brains on that. Communicate the vision is a key part of this. I think there are too many firms that still fail to actually get clarity on what the vision of the firm is and actually have all of the people in the firm understand what that vision is. Beautiful example of this, I was at a careers fair with a tech firm that I worked for probably about 8 years ago. And we were at this careers fair looking to recruit other developers to come work for the organisation. And one particular candidate wanders over and starts chatting to one of the junior developers, and he says, I've checked out your website, I can see what the firm does. How is it you make money? And the guy says, investors? I'm fairly sure he didn't really understand the business model there. It didn't need to be given to him in huge amounts of detail, but everybody in the organisation should have a certain amount of understanding of what it is you do, where you're trying to get to, and how those things are going to come together. Go transparent. I've talked a fair bit already about getting closer to the users, really understanding what it is they want, where they're trying to get to. One of the ways that you can really help improve that communication is by actually going public with your roadmap. Let your customers know what it is you're planning on building now, what it is you might be addressing next, and maybe some of those things that you've actually got in the long-term vision out there that you're not going to be addressing anytime soon, but they're definitely on your radar. If you can start sharing that information and make your roadmap public, it's a lot easier to get feedback on your customers to what they're interested in. And there may well be stuff on there that you decide, well, we put that out there, we've got on the roadmap, let me see if we get it around. Maybe that's not something that we should be working that hard on. On the other hand, you might have something that you're planning on doing in 9 months' time, but you suddenly find customers jumping up and down, they really want it now. Okay, let's start digging into this. What is it they actually need? What is it they're trying to achieve? Let's start learning on this, even if we can't start building it right now. So the future of product. Let's take a quick look. It's moving from business speak to the real world. It's becoming more commonplace. The terms are becoming more accessible. It's starting to make more sense to the wider world. It's getting less and less confused with project management, which is a good thing. There are now a number of universities that are actually delivering courses, or at least course modules, that are focused on the art of product management. Certainly there's some in the Valley over in Stafford and MIT. We're starting to see some of the UK business schools show an interest in it. So Henley, INSEAD over in Paris are taking a look as well. We're starting to see more of that. And the bigger organisations like Facebook and Google are starting to run what they call associate product manager programs. Where they're basically bringing in young graduates and moving them through a number of responsibilities quite swiftly in order to actually create good experienced product managers. Now, if I stood in a room of product managers 3 years ago and said, hands up, how many of you left university with the intent to be a product manager? The answer would be 0. Every single one of them would have fallen into it by accident. I can now go to a product meetup and say, how many people intended to be a product manager? And there will be at least a half a dozen hands in the room that go up and people saying, yep, this is absolutely, I've identified this as a career, this is what I wanted to do. So it's very much gaining that mainstream position. It's a role that is difficult to measure. How do you measure somebody's ability to make the right decision versus the wrong decision on what to build? How long does it take them? What's the cost associated with choosing the right or the wrong project, or the right or the wrong feature to attack first? One of the things that we're going to see an awful lot more in our world over the next couple of years is people looking specifically at how you measure product managers, how you measure the value of product management, how you do things like identify a poorly performing product manager and support them to get to where they need to be. There's so much of the role that is soft skills. With something like engineering, it's a little bit easier to manage to measure things like velocity, or to measure the number of bugs that a particular coder ships. With product, that's not so easy. We've seen the rise of the chief product officer. More and more firms around the world and in London are starting to put product on board. You're starting to see representation at that level. If we go back 10 years, in London, typically the firms those few firms that did have product people, they'd either have them reporting into marketing or reporting into the CTO. Now, if product is there to figure out the strategy for your product, i.e. to figure out what you should be building, and who you're building it for, and where it's going, and engineering are there to actually get it built and shipped. Having engineering run product is kind of like having a tail wagging the dog. You really do need that representation of the product team on the board alongside engineering, so that they can figure out hand in hand what is it we're building, who we're building it for, what's it going to achieve, and how we're going to get it done. They work best hand in hand like that. And we're now starting to see that. Self-building apps, I think, is very much the future, but a very interesting place for product people to be. You look at the likes of WordPress or Shopify now, you can pretty much build in your spare bedroom an exact replica of the thing that first launched Amazon. You can drag and drop, you can point and click. Siri, I've got an idea. How fast is Siri going to actually start building apps for you? The amount that you can do now, hooking together things like Gift and Zapier to almost build mini apps yourself. And finally, there was a Google project out in Mountain View where they were experimenting with a piece of AI, and they'd given it the ability to improve itself, to basically identify inefficiencies within its own system. And it got to the point where it figured out that the programming language that it was written in was the single biggest inefficiency. So it rewrote its own language. At that point, the people responsible for the system couldn't see what was going on in it. They couldn't figure out how it was making decisions, and they couldn't tell how it was going to go next. Where does product management fit within that if you don't know where it wants to go? That's me. That's an overview of where product management is at right now. I figure questions and chit-chat from here. I hope that was useful.
Thanks, Judge.
Pleasure.
I've got some questions, but who wants
Go
to go
first.
first?
Thanks very much for the talk. Being sort of a product manager, I could sort of identify with lots of the challenges there. And how important do you think it is as a product manager to have expertise in the product or the discipline that you're working on, or do you find that it's a very transferable role? I mean, in a way, it is, maybe should be, could be, but
Yeah.
I mean, that's one thing I'm sort of grappling with. I'm not quite sure. Yeah, there are transferable skills, but actually you do need to know, I find, really what you're talking about.
Theoretically, the core skills of product management should be very, very transferable. So you're looking at things like research, decision making, prioritization, collaboration, building cross-functional teams. They should be very, very transferable. But you and I both know that when you go into an environment and you actually know how a particular vertical market works, there are certain things where this is a known, this is given. Now, it's always going to be unwise to completely and utterly rely on those assumptions. Markets do change, things do move. You want to be able to challenge that from time to time. But having some background knowledge in the vertical is certainly helpful. Yeah. It also gives you a good warning as to where some of the pitfalls are going to be.
Some predictor of good idea.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Getting blinded by Virginia.
Any more, John?
Yeah, I was going to ask, when you, at the beginning you were saying it's between UX, technology and business.
Yeah.
It is a fairly new discipline. Presumably people are coming from one of those areas previously.
Typically, yes.
What tends to be the most common? Do you find this?
Historically, I would have said the technology side of things, and particularly a lot of the US-led tech firms would always insist that a product manager had a computer science background.
Yeah.
That's historically been the case. It's not the overriding case, and it's certainly starting to change. We see some that come in from the marketing side of things. More and more I'm seeing people from customer success, customer support come into product management. And the angle that they bring particularly is the ability to say, I've been in customer success for the last 3 years, I know where this customer is feeling the pain, I know what this customer is trying to achieve. So they can walk in with a huge amount of knowledge and customer empathy right out the gate.
Because there are three very disparate fields.
Absolutely.
Because I've worked in ad agencies where you have a project manager, very often they have no technology background. That was always a problem, trying to talk to the techies in their own language. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say from the product customer's point of view, I see a lot of product people who can code, they don't necessarily need to. What they do need to do is they need to understand the technology well enough to have those conversations. Yeah. And likewise, when you're planning out sprints and things like that, you need a product person to be able to engage with the technical team and understand how big is this challenge really? Yeah. Are these engineers being honest about what we're taking on, and are these predictions reasonable? Are we making sensible technology choices here, or are we choosing something that's going to shoot us in the face?
Yeah.
Like I say, you don't necessarily need to be able to code, but a good, broad technical knowledge certainly helps.
So what was the difference you said about between project manager and product owner?
Between?
Product manager and product owner.
This is a debate that continues to run on so many different pages, blogs and comments everywhere. Typically a product manager is an actual job title, whereas a product owner is a role that is played by somebody within a particular team to deliver a particular thing. It's possible to be a product manager in your day job, also a product owner on this particular piece over here. It's also possible for somebody to be customer facing as a business analyst in their day job, but also a product owner for a particular aspect of the thing that's being worked on. It is something that is fluid in what I can see. Certainly, a lot of the tech companies that hire across Europe will call the role of product owner, and they will advertise and hire 4 product owners. And you look at what they're actually doing, no, that's not taking the role within the squad, that is a product manager's job. But it's typically, a product owner is usually focused on an aspect of.
I think from where I'm working at the moment, the product owner tends to be sort of on the business side, so they're delivering or in charge of what the business needs, whereas the product manager should be looking at what the client, what the user needs.
I also see business analysts sitting in the role as product owners.
Yeah.
But again, I think a lot of organisations have different views on that. I don't think you're going to get a clear answer from anybody anytime soon.
You mentioned some of the sort of lag metrics, like ROI.
Mm-hmm.
What would be the lead metrics that you should keep an eye on?
To keep an eye out for product managers. Yeah, this is something that is still at the very, very early stages of being defined. The businesses that I think are probably making the best job of trying to approach it at the moment, the businesses that are trying to figure out OKRs, so objectives and key results, and basically getting teams aligned around that. And that way you're getting a pretty consistent approach across the whole team. Everybody aligned around the same set of goals, the same set of key results. It makes it a little bit easier to spot. I still think that actually measuring the success or otherwise of a product manager is probably one of the hardest things to do in the space.
Who's most responsible for looking after customers' expectations?
Customer expectations. The customer's going to they're going to come with their own expectations, which will be influenced by a myriad set of outside forces, for sure, not least your competitors. From the perspective of your organisation, their customer expectations are typically going to be set and managed by sales and marketing. And that's typically going to be one of your pain points anyway, because they will overpromise and they will absolutely ship that for you, not a problem. And then go make that the product manager's job to actually try and make that happen. And the product manager is saying, oh, no, you should have checked this first. A lot of the time it's sales and marketing that set those expectations or create those expectations. The best organisations that I see trying to solve that problem are the ones where you've got the sales and marketing teams plugged right in tight with the product people, so they have a realistic view of what's actually being built and what the priorities are, so they've got the opportunity to communicate that to the customers. It also then gives the product team the opportunity to get those stories straight from the customers and get back tight with that, get that loop going, get that communication going both ways. But typically it's the sales and marketing that have the bigger influence on that. As I said earlier, if you can get to the point where you're publishing your roadmap and actually making that available on your website, that can influence things.
So, I work here at the council and we're Google users rather than Microsoft. And Google are completely unable to give you any dates on future enhancements to their product suite. Absolutely, can't even give you a year. They know that they're working on it.
Yeah, that's exactly where they should be.
It's very frustrating.
Yes, it is. It is, but it's also, at a very high level, you could say, well, we're working on this piece of work right now, and we commit that we'll have it delivered in 9 months' time. We've got a team of 12 people. Great. How confident are you that you'll still have the same 12 people working on that in 9 months' time? There's no way you can be certain. There's no way you can say, in 4 months' time, that particular bug is going to occur, it's going to be a way bigger challenge than we ever thought. There's no way you can sit there and say, we know exactly what regulation is going to hit us over the next 12 months. Because, as I think we saw in Westminster today, shit changes really fast. Putting dates on things is a really, really bad idea. The closest you want to get with dates is to say, we're working on this in the short term, these things in the medium term, that stuff's way out there in the long term. And the stuff that we're planning to deliver in the next month, sure, we can put dates on that. We should be reasonably confident about that now. Anything further than that, you're just lining yourself up for a meeting.
So, how do you wean delivery teams off Gantt charts and...
I'm going to step out on this one and nominate the young lady down here, because that's actually her specialist topic.
Oh, right, okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Jenna.
This is my co-founder, Jana.
I'm the road mapping girl, and I'm one of James's co-founders on the minor product side. And one of the things that I do is I work with companies who are confused about the road mapping processes and wondering things like, how do I wean my team and my customers off having this timeline-written roadmap? The reality is that having a timeline-written roadmap, having a roadmap that looks like a Gantt chart, a series of features against a series of dates that you're going to deliver on, is a huge risk. And at the end of the day, as the product manager, you're the person saying, this is our roadmap, we're going to try to stick to this, but when it all goes wrong, it's actually not your fault, but everyone thinks it is your fault. And what tends to happen is that the more dates you stack up on there, the more assumptions you're making, and the less flexibility you're giving yourself, the less chance you have of changing in tune with the market. If a competitor comes in or if a customer asks for something, the less likely you are to be able to add in enough time to deal with some crazy bug that comes in and swipes in at month 4. This has happened to every project ever. And one of the things I learned is that the more people who created these roadmaps, the more that they thought that they were going to get this, like if I make a roadmap at the beginning of the year, then by the end of the year I shall have delivered it. Which is universally not true. I don't think I've ever seen a roadmap actually get delivered. So to wean your team off, it depends on what their actual particular problem is. Some teams like being deadline driven, right? If you're saying I'm the product manager and you're the engineers building it, some teams actually like having that assurance that this is what we're building and somebody knows what it is you're supposed to be working on today. In that case, it's not necessarily that you're not allowing them to be deadline driven and to have this structure. You should be giving them some direction of this is what we're trying to achieve. However, I'm going to give you freedom on how long it's going to take. You tell me, you're the one building it, and don't take those dates that they promise you and give them to the customer or give them to the bosses, because that, at the end of the day, is just going to add stress to their side. For the bosses, this is where it gets really tricky, is taking away their deadlines, because your bosses and your board love the level of certainty that you give them when you show them this perfect project plan of the course of the year. The reality is that they actually usually don't care whether you deliver this particular thing. What they actually want you to do is build the best possible, most profitable thing, usually, that you can with the resources they have. And you can often start poking holes in this by saying things like, well, if this is what we're going to be working on in month 9, how big is the team going to be in month 9? Are you going to get the 5 developers to us? Are we actually closing funding in 3 months' time, or is that going to be 5 months' time? Because that's going to change my resource planning that you want me to do way out here. Instead, what I'm going to do is give you a ranked list of problems or obstacles that we see and stack them up and say, this is the biggest problem, this is the problem we're going to tackle after that, this is the problem we're going to tackle after that. I don't know whether this is 9 months away or 12 months away or 18 months away, and frankly, it doesn't matter. As long as we're solving this problem, we all agree this is the biggest problem first, then you're working on the right stuff. If you are trying to plan out stuff over here, you're actually wasting everyone's time, and so that Gantt chart thing ends up losing them time and building them a worse product. Some tips that I've seen is taking that timeline off the top. So don't have time along the top, because as soon as you have time along the top, everything underneath it has time and a deadline associated with it. Instead, create buckets. So have a now bucket, this is what's keeping us busy now, and these are the problems we think we're going to tackle next-ish. And here's the things that we're going to tackle after that. And you stack things up in this bucket, and people can say, well, what's the date on this thing down here? And you say, it doesn't really matter. I mean, are these the right things to do? Let's give you dates for the things that are happening here. These are the things that we've got people actively working on. It's either this sprint or next sprint, so therefore I'm happy to give you a little bit of an assumption on the date here. Out here, I mean, they're making it up, therefore I'm making it up, therefore whatever you assume, you're making it up too. So it's like weeding them off and taking away those dates and keeping your focus on the short term, solving the right problems that you can actually get away and change your roadmap process.
Janice Fraser, CPO Bionic, has a wonderful turn of phrase. She's campaigning for us to end our addiction to being right. Putting dates on things is just trying to be right. And you're not. You're going to do wrong time after time. And once you actually get people to understand that those dates are never going to be met, it's a little bit easier to start letting go of them.
So how do you punch it?
Yeah, what's that? That's an open checkbook, isn't it? So I presume is the only thing.
It kind of is, but it also depends on how fast the company wants to go. If the company wants to go faster, you're going to need more engineers. It's going to have to give you more budget. There's only a certain amount of pace that any given engineer can build at.
There's some companies that work very much with dates. They get a requirement, they allot a certain amount of time and money or resources towards it, and then they work their butts off and they hit that date. Some of them get really good at it, and it's a good way of making money. These companies are called agencies. Time and time again, they release chunks of work, many projects, one after the other. The reality is that while agencies are a good way of making some money and building a business, they're not the type of companies that change the world. product-based companies, the Facebooks, the Apples, the Googles of the world, are the companies that get in there and absolutely change stuff. And inherently, the beginning parts of building a product-based company is wasteful. I mean, how much waste went into Hewlett-Packard's, we don't even know what we're building, we're just going to keep trying to do stuff. And yet here they are 50 years later, still succeeding. There's not many companies who do one project after the next that can say that. So the reality is that companies need to start changing their tune from focusing on having these budget allotments and putting the resources towards that and assuming they can just build these myopic projects right in front of them to solve their problems. Because these are the companies that are getting eaten alive by startups who move faster and don't have these constraints. If you give somebody a budget, all they're going to do with it is try to fill that budget. I was given $1 million, and so I can get 100 developers for that, and therefore I'm going to have 100 developers and give them 100 developers worth of work. And then next year I'm going to keep that up in order to keep that budget, as opposed to focusing on, well, actually, as a company, our vision is this, and these are the big problems we want to solve. Regardless of the budget, we're going to use the resources we have and whatever we can put towards it to solve the problems in front of us.
The other approach to it is also to take a look at the most valuable companies that are out there today. Take a look down that list of the top 10, and you'll find it's populated by companies like Facebook, and Apple, and Google. So, yeah, these approaches do work. Just for one other point that doesn't come up very often, it's a pretty well obscured fact. Amazon's no longer a startup. I think we can all accept that Amazon's days of being a startup are long gone, right? So this idea of iterating quickly and reacting to customer needs quickly, constantly shipping new code, constantly testing things. People think that that's only applicable if you're a startup organisation, and it's not possible to do that in the enterprise. Amazon is clearly bloody huge. Anybody want to guess how often Amazon ships new code? Somebody take a guess.
Every day.
Every day? Fast.
10 years.
11.7 seconds. Every 11 seconds, Amazon ships new code.
Don't they have this thing called two-pizza teams or something?
Two-pizza
where
teams.
They only have very small teams.
Yep.
The amount of people that can only eat 2 pizzas or something like that.
If your team is more than 2 pizzas for lunch, your team's too big. Yeah. And the idea is to keep those teams really tight and neat and fast.
And James touched on a really interesting point, which is key, which is autonomy. Giving those teams the ability to do their best work and put things out there. And you can give teams autonomy if you give them the overall direction. If you say, you know what, our job is to take that hill, you guys as a team, that's probably 2 pizza team here, maybe 3 or 4, two pizza teams here, put together, you guys have skills, you could find your way up that hill. But if you have some pointy-haired boss saying this is the one particular route to take, all you're going to get is one person's take on how to solve that problem, and it's not going to be the best. I actually have a different answer than James on that first question, which is, does the product manager need to have domain expertise? And yes, it can come in handy, but it can also be one of the worst things for a team. The worst, most dangerous thing is a product manager who thinks they know the right way of doing stuff. Because at that point in time, all you're building is one thing. And I'm sorry, but none of us are Steve Jobs. None of us are that magical product manager who knows the answer and can deliver on it. All of us are here to ask questions more than anything else. The best product managers are the ones who actually don't know things and are not afraid of asking questions, saying, is that the right hill? How do we get over a bridge? How do we get over a fence? Right? How would you guys tackle it? How would you tackle it? And allowing their team to help answer those questions with them.
One of the fundamental jobs of any product manager simply should be to ask better questions. You should be asking better questions than everybody else in the room. If you can keep doing that, then you can extract the answers from everybody else in the room. Then you give yourself a far greater bucket of knowledge to draw upon.
Which frankly makes it one of the easiest jobs in the world. I'm a product manager.
I know a lot of product managers that disagree with that.
I'm a product manager because I'm a failed coder, and I was a webmaster at one point in time, and I wasn't that great at that, right? I was a designer, I tried to do that, I was told not to quit my day job. I worked in customer support, but there wasn't a huge future in that. I like marketing, I like to think I'm good at it, words and copy, but I'm not as good as the experts at it. Product managers tend to come from these jack of all trades, you know, people who were kind of good at it, but actually kind of wanted to get their hands in everything. And I spent the first few years in my role as a product manager thinking I needed to know everything, and so I wouldn't talk about anything until I'd done a whole bunch of research and tried to find the right answer and then propose that. It was really freeing when I realized that actually it's not my job to have all the answers. My job is simply to ask the questions and to get all the different people who are experts to work together to come up with the best solution.
It's one of the things that we touch on fairly regularly with the conference is trying to give product managers a safe space to actually explore those feelings. Because one of the things that almost every product manager suffers from is a constant case of imposter syndrome. Everybody familiar with imposter syndrome? You can. So when you're a product manager, you've typically got designers who are experts at what they do, and developers who are experts at what they do, and marketeers and salespeople who are all expert at what they do. As a product manager, you're a jack of all trades sat in the middle. You are surrounded by experts and you feel like the imposter in the room every time.
So you need good people skills then, I would imagine. It's all over the wall.
It is, at the end of the day, a people management role, but it's more difficult than people management because you're not the boss of anybody at all. You generally have to work and work alongside people who work for someone else, work for the same person you do, but don't work for you. So they don't answer to you. You are constantly asking for favors and trying to win them over. This is why one of the heroes in the product management space, Ken Norton, he's a long-time product manager for all things Google and a bunch of other big names up there, now is a partner at Google Ventures. His newsletter, which you guys absolutely have to pick up on, is called Bringing the Donuts. It's about currying favors with your developers and bringing them, you know, making sure that you've got them on your side when it comes to asking them tough things like, hey, so your prototype that you built, it works cool, so the tech is good, but the users hate it, so we're going to throw it out. They're like, again, I'm running donuts. So it is a tough job. I don't want to minimize the efforts that we go through. And there's a question here, actually, for you.
And in a software development lifecycle, what is the most common questions is asked by product owner? I mean, as a product owner, in a software development lifecycle, what is the most common question is asking?
So throughout the software development cycle, what kind of questions does the product owner ask?
Yeah.
The most important question, the one that if you guys are going to remember anything from tonight, what problem are you trying to solve? If you can ask that question over and over, you basically are a product manager. That's all you do. Because
you can just continuously get closer to the truth.
yeah, you can start conversations. If somebody says, "Oh, I saw this cool thing," cool. What problem are you trying to solve? And they then have to articulate to you what they saw and why they liked it and that kind of stuff. It's really good for ending conversations as well. I've got this cool technology, it's got blockchain, it's got things, I put them together, and you're like, that's a thing. What problem are you trying to solve? And if somebody can't identify what the problem is, you can put the conversation to the side.
The quote is also worth remembering. I guess some at least will be familiar with Hugh Laurie in the US series House. He was a medical doctor. He particularly focused on investigative research with really difficult cases. Everybody lies. He will continuously tell you that everybody lies. It's the same in product management. When you're talking to the users, when you're talking to the customers, keep asking them. Because to start with, they will lie. It's like, oh yeah, if you build that, we'll pay for it. Really? Really though?
And you had a question?
Oh yeah, so listening to what you were saying, it opened up some scars.
I'm sorry about that. We'll go for some beer afterwards.
I was telling you earlier about sort of the startup for the last sort of 6 years, and I was given this title. I inherited it, and which was okay at first when there was one product, but then actually there ended up being more products, and I was always considered to be the product manager of them all. And then you couldn't really work that very easily. But then I imagine that's probably a common problem with
Products definitely multiply faster than product managers, yes.
Yeah, so it's really how that's kind of managed. I was interested also what you said about the kind of it's a role that so it doesn't necessarily be full time, and it might end up being more than full time. But then, so it's how you manage can you be multiple product owner? And is there also a problem when it comes to the size of the product? Can one person manage? I'm just trying to think. Is there a product owner of the Office suite of Microsoft, or or do you have to break it down, or
Yeah, I mean, you're starting to see these kind of hierarchies emerge. But as I said earlier, you look at the UK organisations like Vodafone, where 5 years ago, no product people, they now have 400 product managers. You're starting to see that kind of hierarchy emerge. You're also starting to see what I would say, what I would call competency frameworks emerge. So there'll be a product manager at this level, these kinds of experiences, have conducted these kind of tasks and run these kind of sprints, for example.
Right.
Whereas when you're moving to director of product or VP of product, you're looking at very, very different skill sets. And
do you think that there would have been 10, a Vodafone example, there's 400 now, 5 years ago there might have actually been 10 people, but they would have been covering the same amount of products, whereas now you've actually got, sort of foot soldiers and a couple of...
I think that changes between organisations. So in some, you would have had 10 product managers that are actually covering way too much stuff, and they're all running around like headless chickens the whole time. In others, it would have been the case where you'd had a couple of product managers in one particular area doing really good things, moving faster than everywhere else, and as a result that got recognised, so the business then decides to introduce product management as a function to other areas of the business in order to make improvements. So I've seen both patterns emerge.
One thing that I usually recommend people do when they're trying to figure out how they split up their portfolio and the different products within it is to not think about your product portfolio in terms of how your customers view it, but think about how you manage it. So some companies might have 10 different products, but in reality it's all one platform that's spun off from that. And therefore, at the end of the day, it's actually managed as one product. One of the bigger indicators that we've seen change over the years, and that's a good indication of the product manager's sanity, is how many developers per product manager there are. I have met some product managers who were the sole product manager of their entire company, and they had 100 developers. Like, there's no way a single person can understand that scope of pieces of work being done, the scope of the specs to be written, the customers that product inevitably touches. No way. About 8 years ago when we started doing this, we would survey our users and find out what that ratio was. It was about 10 to 1, so 10 developers for every 1 product manager. Nowadays that number is actually changing. It's now closer to 6 to 1. So therefore, product managers now only have not to manage, but to work with 6 developers each.
We are seeing is the emergence of more specialised roles to go alongside that. So the actual team unit of 10 might still be accurate, but what you're seeing is a lower number of engineers as they're also bringing in things like a specialist user researcher, somebody to focus particularly on UX UI design. Whereas 10 years ago that was predominantly done by the developers as well. There just happened to be a front-end developer who was responsible for doing all of the UX and UI research as well. Paul was crying a lot. But just starting to see that. Does that sound familiar?
And don't forget how much development has changed. I mean, 10, 20 years ago, development was ridiculously hard. You needed a lot of developers just to get base level functionality out there. Nowadays, it's a lot easier to build stuff, as James pointed out. Like, things are now much more point and click. When you were telling me earlier that you manage something like 13 different sites, 12 different sites, that would not have been possible 20 years ago. It would have taken a team of people to do that, and a massive room of servers and all this other stuff. Nowadays, that's a lot easier to manage because the technology is easier. But as we go, as James said, I think we're going to see the roles change. 10, 20 years ago, the focus for companies was way more about which features they got out the door and how fast they could deliver features. And some companies got really addicted to that because they thought every new feature gets us new customers and sales and downloads, and customers love features. When in reality, the best products out there are often the ones that have fewer features and simplify stuff. And it's not about how much code you can ship out the door, it's about how many problems you can solve. And developers are great at shipping code out the door. It's quite literally what they've been hired to do, is to write stuff and put it out there. Product managers are more curators. They're the ones figuring out which pieces make sense as a cohesive product. Their job is to solve problems, not necessarily to just have more features.
If you ever need an example of that simplicity, just feel free to remind people that one of the world's most successful web pages has 1 box, 2 buttons that can be found at google.com.
Compare that to Yahoo.
Okay, any more? Or should we go to the pub? Okay, go on.
One more, then we'll go to
In software development life cycle,
Scrum, who creates the stories, for instance, in Agile, because the Scrum Masters or product owners, what's the relation and why?
Such a good question, and what you have are two answers. You've got the textbook answer, which is this is how Scrum works, this is what a product owner is, this is what the Scrum Master is. So in that case, it'd be the product owner would be writing the specs, and the Scrum Master would be managing the team of people who are building the stories, building the tech that matches those specs. In reality, it depends. I mean, at this point in time, it comes down to who on the team did it before, who's skilled enough to do it, is Fred out this week or not. At the end of the day, anybody can write specs. Specs are simply you articulating what it is the users want, and spec writing has changed hugely. I mean, when I started in this thing, it was all about writing UML and these diagram things.
Somebody's been there. 400 pages of old documentation, and now it's just the user stories.
I went through a gherkin phase. Everybody know gherkin? Okay, yeah. All right. Then there was like user stories. As a user, I want this in order to do this. That was not cool enough. They've now created something called jobs to be done. So the customer has a job. They don't want a quarter-inch hole. They don't want a quarter-inch drill. They want a quarter-inch hole. But actually, they don't want the quarter-inch hole. They want the picture hung on the wall. And so that's the job to be done thing, and you can take that, and the developers can articulate it how they want. At the end of the day, no one freaking cares. The developers just want specs that are clear enough that they can build from, and at the end of the day, ensure that what they're building doesn't just get trashed by the customers. And anybody can write those specs. It's usually the person who knows the customers, knows the problems, and can articulate it in a way that works for the developer, whoever that happens to be.
Once again, proximity to customer being one of the most important aspects.
So a lot of the product management you're talking about seems to be product management of software in some way.
Yep.
I work at the moment with product managers who don't do software, they do financial instruments.
Oh.
So
Okay.
I actually write product management software for collaboration of people who are building things that are not software.
Excellent.
So we have, I work with big financial institutions,
Yeah.
and their products are what's this week's cool thumb?
Yeah.
Who's going to invest in? How can we get people to buy this new thing, this new
Yeah.
hedge fund, this new whatever? And so it's not a I'm building software to help them collaborate, but actually what they're building is a piece of paper that describes an investment strategy.
Yeah.
Is that?
So.
I come across them occasionally. We've actually done a lot of work with Lloyds Bank over the last 4 or 5 years. Lloyds were very, very uncomfortable with the rate at which challenger banks were emerging in London and startup world and starting to eat their breakfast. And they started doing some research on it, and they came across the idea of product managers. And they sat there thinking, well, we've got product managers, they build the products that we sell all day long. We've got hundreds of product managers. So they started trying to see if they could use those product managers to do digital products. And it didn't work terribly well. Funnily enough. So they've actually started working with us recently, specifically to say, you have a community of digital product managers. How do we get those people to come work for the bank?
Yeah.
Well, the first thing you need to do is actually try and get across the message somehow that the bank is, whilst it's 200 years old, it does actually have the ability to learn and develop and do new things. They are terribly, terribly different roles. And my experience of seeing the two next to one another within Lloyds has been best not to mix them.
Yeah. Because where these financial institutions, because I've got 3 or 4 major clients in this area, and then what they concentrate is on what are they good at, what strategies are they good at, what are the, and then they try. I've worked on one project where it wasn't products, but it was proposals that we were working on. How do you put together? You look at the skills that we have in this organisation. What's the way of packaging them up so that we can come up with a killer thing that people are going to invest their money in?
So turning up at this meetup, you probably feel like everything we're saying has nothing to do with
No,
what you're talking about at all.
I know it does, because obviously it
So
does.
it's when you first started saying I don't work in software, I thought you were going to say I work in hardware, which I'm like, cool, it's just like software but slower.
No, I
Some of those things
I
are
literally
better.
work on software.
still.
But the software is what I'm generating is is not. I'm sort of meta
So-
about this whole thing.
So if you look at the history of product manager, you know, through the tech route that James is talking about, and the history of the product manager in the financial world, they actually, I mean, it's almost as if like two animals evolved to look similar and have the same name, but they have nothing to do with each other.
I think that's right.
And so it's actually just by accident. It's really confusing on LinkedIn when you're like a product manager.
Because you know, we try and so our product we try and so our product we make that is to support these people doing this
Yes.
doesn't match up with other product management software out there because it's doing collaborative documentation,
Yeah.
and out of our process comes the information for the salesman.
And so the reality is that the soft skills part of this stuff is applicable to anybody. These are the types of things, asking questions and trying to solve problems isn't something that product managers have some special hold on. You'll see the same in people talking about design thinking or lean enterprise, or people talking about service design, hardware manufacturing, stuff like that. And surely applicable in just about any other space or area. It's when you start getting down to the tactical and what, you know, what that guy thinks about specs are, what you think specs are, or what, you know, you consider a product and you consider
We have
product.
attempted to sell our software into a gas boiler company in Amsterdam. That was very interesting because it comes from a financial background. It almost worked.
So you build software for product managers.
Yeah.
I build software for product managers, but completely different. Let's go for beer.
Yes, it's a very different one.
Because I'm going to learn from you as well.
Okay, I think we're going to get there, but
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Thank you.